All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Excited to be with you. Yes, I am back home. I just landed about an hour and a half ago or so. So
Yep.
Elizabeth picked me up and she said, "You ready for live stream?" I said, "I just got here." But I said, "Sure." Especially with what's going on right now, I am sure you guys are keeping an eye on the development regarding the Israel-Iran war or conflict, or whatever term you want to call it. So, what do you think, Elizabeth? Where this is going, in your opinion?
Oh my God. This
Uh,
escalated really quickly. And, typically we do economic content right now, but this
that's
is
true.
such a big deal that we decided it was really important to do this topic.
Yeah,
And so that's it's it is escalating so freaking quickly, and I think part of the reason that it's going
yeah,
off the rails as much as it is because Donald Trump tweets, or I guess it's called truth socials now.
yeah,
And the things that he puts on social media are not exactly gentle. They're really inflammatory. They're a
yeah,
really big deal, and they're sort of acting like he is kind of the end all be all sort of supreme decider of what's
yeah,
happening. And
yeah,
so they're really intense.
yeah,
So it's gone from zero to 1,000 really really
yeah, yeah.
fast, and today has escalated even further.
But could he also be just adding fuel to the fire
Oh
for the
my gosh,
sake for the sake?
absolutely.
But here is the reason: for the sake of inflating the sort of the role that he can play into this conflict.
Well, so I definitely think so, because all right, so let's take a look at this,
Yeah,
because this is a great place to start. And as always, this show is sponsored. We have a wonderful sponsor, and we'll talk about them in a second. But I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, OPWEF Explorations, because
yeah,
all of our shows this week are sponsored by them.
that's correct.
Okay. So let's read this out. So this he posted this on Truth Social today, June 17th,
Hmm.
at 10 in the morning. I've got a bunch of these wild Truth Social posts. Okay, and tell me this is not really inflammatory. This is almost borderline threatening, I think. I mean, you guys give
Yeah,
me your opinions on it. We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but is safe there. We're not going to take him out, parentheses. Yeah, at
yeah.
least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Of course, absolutely, that's true. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And then it says underneath, unconditional surrender. So it's like when you like send a
Yeah.
text and then you're just like send another text really fast. So yeah, this is a pretty
Well,
inflammatory.
there are two aspects to that. The two parts is the first part as far as the statement as to the whereabouts of Ali Khamenei. Now, some will say maybe he's just sort of bluffing. That means Mr. Trump. On the
Mhm.
other hand, when you think about it, what the Israelis did when they attacked Iran the last 5 or 6 days, they targeted the three top leadership in the military.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, and we mentioned it yesterday, as to have the Israelis been provided with the intelligence regarding the location of those individuals, which means what? There is a mole somewhere inside the government of Iran that is feeding the
Mm.
information to the Israelis. Could be that Mr. Trump is saying this because the US might end up having the same information. I don't know. What do you guys think? We're just putting this out. Second thing is that second thing has to do with unconditional surrender. There is
Mhm.
no way now for this one, and it's my opinion, Mr. Trump is just inflating whatever. Iran is not going to surrender no matter what.
Mhm.
That's to me, it's at least as one who wrote a book about Iran, I did the research on it. You have to understand the history of Persia because Iran is not a country that was just emerged to the scene, let's say 50 years ago or so. It has a long history. And if we only understand the role of the Persian Empire into shaping the world history, it will make more sense to us. So there's no surrender. Those are the 2 points I wanted to highlight, at least before we delve in deeper into all this.
Well, and I think you're speaking to something really important, and that is, really, I think ultimately the question everybody is asking right now is, should the U.S. get involved in this or not? And especially if there's, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, that's the legitimate questions you asked.
Yep.
That is the question on the mind of every analyst who thinks in terms of the bigger picture. That will be the key question to ask.
Mm-hmm. Let's jump into our sponsor spot really quickly. I just want to make sure we get them in.
That brings me to today's show sponsor, OPWEF Explorations, Inc. A big thank you to our sponsors, because without them, the show wouldn't be possible. The demand for new high-grade gold discoveries is surging, and that's where I want to talk about a company called OPWEF Explorations, Inc. They trade on the U.S. stock market. The ticker symbol is OPWEF on the screen below. They could be well positioned to capitalize on this trend, offering investors exposures to potential upside in the heart of Quebec's prolific mining country. Introducing OPWEF Explorations, Inc. They have their flagship gold exploration project in Quebec's world-renowned Abitibi Gold Belt, and are purely focused on achieving their next major goal, making the next significant gold discovery in one of the world's richest mining regions, Quebec's Abitibi Gold Belt, the premier mining district. Quebec is consistently ranked as one of the world's top mining jurisdictions, renowned for its strategic location for trade with the U.S., stable regulations, infrastructure, and rich mineral endowment. The Abitibi Gold Belt alone has produced over 190 million ounces of gold from 120 mines. OPWEF's properties are strategically located near these giants, with one of the largest producing gold mines right next door to their Arrowhead property. Check out OPWEF Explorations using the link below. Remember, there are always risks in investment, and there are no guarantees of any kind. Please always do your own research. Thank you.
Okay, back to us.
Yeah.
Okay,
before we move on to this, I want to make just one comment regarding gold, since I'm thinking about it, just to share with our community. By the way, guys, today it was announced that the state of Florida is going to now adopt gold and silver as a legal tender. That tells
very
you
interesting.
Yeah, I found it very interesting as to where things are headed regarding the usage of gold in the financial sector. I just wanted to mention this one.
Well, I think that's really speaking to the instability that's happening around the world, and I think this is definitely not helping.
Indeed.
And I think one of the things that Donald Trump is really known for is being very inflammatory and very, very hot-headed. But this, and David, you're really a subject matter expert in this, and so I'd really like to dive a little bit further and get your opinions on, if that were to happen, if the United States were to jump in, if the United States were to get involved in this conflict, what would ultimately be the consequence? Because it's not just Iran involved in this; it's China, it's Russia. So can you dive a little bit into that? What would actually happen if that were the case?
Well, of course, if the U.S. gets involved, expect that the scale of the conflict is going to go beyond the borders of Iran. Why? Because Iran does have the capabilities of reaching out to the U.S. military bases. And what Mr. Trump is saying, that I'll dare you to target U.S. troops or U.S. installations, what do you think Iranians going to do? Because if Iran's government doesn't react, then you will see a revolution inside Iran from the population wanted to topple the regime. There are those who are saying now, this is not about nuclear program. It is about regime change. I don't think so. It has to do with the nuclear program, because Israel is very, very concerned, and specifically with one particular site, and that is Fardo nuclear power plants. That's where they do the enrichments of the uranium at a high level. So that is where the concern of Israel. And the reason for all this, because Israel does not want to lose, as you know, I'm sure you guys know this one, the balance of power. Because if, as of today, if you are to think or ask yourself, who is the sort of the strongest in the region, in West Asia or Middle East, basically Israel comes at the top. We're not sort of minimizing the size of Iran. We're not minimizing the size of Turkey. You know, those are the two key players. As to the Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, those are useless anyway. We don't worry about those. However, if the US gets involved, those countries will also be attacked because they host US troops on their grounds. And this is why Russia and China, it's going to provide support one way or another, diplomatically at the UN Security Council, but also logistically by providing certain type of either anti-missile systems, defense systems, you name it. They're going to be doing one way or another. Iran has the other option of having its sort of the groups that it's been supporting throughout the years. You take, for example, the Houthis in Yemen and Hezbollah in Lebanon. There are those who are saying, well, Hezbollah is dead. No, it's not. Yes, the Israelis took out Hassan Nasrallah, but that doesn't mean they are dead. They still can come back and fire whatever they need to fire. But the point is that Israel will be attacked from different locations, and this is why I found one particular message from the Iranian officials is that they are now giving warning to the civilians to leave Tel Aviv if they want to stay alive. That tells me that the Iranians are moving forward with the retaliation on a massive scale. Because the retaliation, the first one they did, that was just to counter that. This one they're going to embark on, it will be some sort of a punishment. And if they do that, they're not going to be using marches on this. It is my belief that they're going to be using some advanced missile systems they developed over the years. And Iran did develop some missile technology that is very capable of challenging. We saw what happened with the Israeli defense systems that was unable to shut down the Houthis' hypersonic missiles. Where the Houthis got that from? Of course, Iran provided some of that support for them.
Well, I think a really big question also is, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I think another really big question. So, I mean, David, really what you're talking about is, I think people have been throwing around World War III, like this is the beginning of World War III, because this is such a volatile situation. And in a sense, it's very interesting because it is kind of a global South versus West conflict, because you have Iran that is basically backed by China, Russia, even North Korea. My understanding is North Korea came out and said that they would also support them. So, you sort of have the global South-ish. And then you basically have the West where, Israel is asking the United States more or less to come to its aid. And it's a big and interesting question because one of the things I just showed was Donald Trump saying that we now control the skies over. Let me see if I can pull it back up. We now have here, I'll share it back to you guys so that you can see it again. There it is. We now have complete and total control over the skies of Iran. Iran has good sky trackers and other defensive equipment and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old US of A. And I think that really begs the question of, we now have complete and total control over the skies of Iran. Like, who is we?
Yeah.
Has the United States, this is very interesting because a lot of the same conversation has come up. So Thomas Massey, let me share this tab instead, said this was a couple of hours ago, earlier this morning. I just introduced an Iran War Powers Resolution with Rep. Ro-Khanna to prohibit U.S. involvement in the Israel-Iran war. This is not our war. Even if it were, Congress must decide such matters according to our Constitution.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share this also. This is Ron Paul. He is talking about Tulsi Gabbard, who is the director of national intelligence. Her assessment that Iran was not working towards a nuclear weapon. And President Trump said yesterday, I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having one. And Ron Paul asks if he will not listen to his director of national intelligence. Who is he listening to? Yeah. So those are very interesting questions. And this seems to have gone further than I think anybody thought could happen that quickly. And a lot of people are actually talking about sort of sounding like throwback. It's sounding like a throwback to, the weapons of mass destruction. Now, I don't know. I'm not there. I'm not in those rooms. I don't know what's real and what isn't real. But, a lot of people are drawing the parallel between, Tulsi Gabbard is coming out and saying that they just weren't doing it. And then Donald Trump's like, well, I don't care what she has to say. Yeah. Then Ron Paul's asking the right question. Who is he listening to if it is not the person appointed to figure this out?
Well, in this case, he's listening to the lobbyist from the APEC. I mean, it's no secret, guys. You all know this one here. If that is the case, that's what it is. So, and the idea that when Tulsi Gabbard said that, guess who countered that argument? It wasn't just Donald Trump. It was the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, who released a report stating that Iran has exceeded the. Well, wait a minute. Does the IAEA has any credibility to begin with? Mm-hmm. It doesn't, because if I am to remember, and I did talk about this few months ago when I disclosed by providing the reference where the IAEA, the head of the IAEA, his name is Mr. Grossi, he's from Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, was caught in bribe from Japan.
Oh, really?
Nuclear in the Pacific, wow. They kept hush about it because there were some bribes, money transfer going on into that. So in my opinion, knowing what I know about IAEA, and I'm not talking on the top of my head here, I am talking based on research that I conducted for my both books, the one about Russia and the one about Iran. But specifically the one about Iran, when I disclosed that IAEA is forced to release certain reports once pressured by the United States. Mm-hmm. Because now what they want to say is, here we are providing the evidence, that Iran has. So, see what I'm getting at? You have Tulsi Gabbard that's saying, no, Iran didn't. And actually, Iran did not. Yeah. Throughout the agreement since 2015, they have held their end of the bargain. We didn't. As you all know, guys, we are the one who pulled out of the JCPOA. So all of a sudden now you have this change of course of action. And this is why you have members of Congress like Massey saying what he's saying. Right. It's because he knows that the American president, he's not going to listen to his members of his own cabinet, but rather to what the APEC, and we all know the influence APEC has on Congress.
Well, and speaking directly to what you're saying, David, I think it's a very fine line, the president having in the past, and the past presidents have not been so great. So I'm not using this as an example of like how great presidents are, but because he can just shoot off social media posts one after another, it sort of seems like he's the only person making these decisions, right? And so, what Thomas Massey brought to the forefront is that Congress is actually who has to decide whether we go to war or not. In the past, presidents have used other means to take us into a conflict that is not necessarily a war, right? But we see Trump, and I'm not pro-Trump. I am not anti-Trump. I am neither thing. I'm just looking at what's happening, but it's a fine line for a president to basically speak for an entire nation without really checking with any of the other checks and balances that we have in this country. And, it's pushing a boundary, it's pushing a line, and it's doing it in a very inflammatory way where the stakes are really high here. This isn't something where like, oh no, it's not a big deal. The stakes are really, really high. If the US joins this conflict and all of a sudden it spirals out of control, I mean, that's an absolute nightmare, not just for the United States, but for the entire world, because it really is the global South basically versus the Western world. And that's not a good place to be. That's not a good conflict.
And the thing is that it comes at a very crucial time in the history of the world, given that we are now, I feel, at a crossroads. That we already moved from that unipolar into a multipolar system. And the way how it's going to evolve over time, the outcome of this conflict now is going to also contributing to defining what type of system is going to be. This is why if the US gets involved, which we have no interest whatsoever in getting involved in a war, let alone one in the region. We all know how the wars in the Middle East end up, our involvements into those or any other parts of the world. And the assumption that if we are to think we're going to get involved and we're going to wipe out Iran, it's nonsense. We couldn't do it in Afghanistan. We couldn't do it in Iraq. We couldn't do it in Somalia. What makes us think we're going to do it against Iran? And that is, to me, the fundamental question is American people do not want to see the U.S. getting involved because of where our economic conditions are.
I think you are absolutely right.
Where the country is headed. The last thing we need right now is another war. Instead of focusing on figuring out how we're going to deal with this national debt, how we're going to deal with people now living paycheck to paycheck and struggling with what's going on. So, I mean, Europe also, and I just came back from Europe, Europe has no stomach for these wars anymore because people also in Europe are very frustrated regarding what their governments are doing. So what Mr. Trump is saying, I think he's been sort of pushed by the lobbyists, whoever's lobbying for this, because it is to the interest of Israel if the U.S. conduct the war on its behalf.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's unquestionably true.
Yeah, and that's what's at the heart of it. And I don't think so. Russia and China will just stand by and watch from the sideline. Now, you can expect the Arab countries, the pathetic, the incompetent leaders of the Arab world to do that. But I don't think so in the case of Russia and China or North Korea, as you mentioned earlier. They're going to stand by and just watch. I don't see that happening. They're going to provide support one way or another. It's because also they have interests that are sort of at stake here. You know, you think about the joint economic partnership that China signed with Iran for 25 years, about $400 billion. You think about the joint ventures that Russia has with Iran regarding the nuclear technology and also the armament. The only issue Iran made, which I believe, in my opinion, was some sort of short-sighted, I won't call it a mistake, but short-sighted, is when it refused to enter into some sort of a military, I won't call it alliance treaty, whatever you want to call it. They refused to do that. Because also you have to think about the history of Persia. Because remember, there was an old wound when it comes down to Soviet Union back then and Iran.
Yeah.
You have to look at the history for this to make sense. So Iran, Persia in general, they tends to stay sort of on their own. But that doesn't mean they won't enter into some sort of cooperation, whatever, except that this one with Russia, it will be on a much larger scale militarily. And that's when they turned it down. And that's exactly what the foreign minister of Russia, Mr. Sergei Lavrov, has mentioned. He mentioned few days ago, and I remember reading it when I was overseas, that it was the Iranian that turned down this military so-called alliance or venture with the Russians. So this is where I see the issue moving forward. The big concern, of course, is now, are we going to get involved? And if we get involved, it's going to be a big problem for us.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a big problem, not just for us, but for the rest of the world. I think you're absolutely right. I think people fundamentally don't have a stomach for war right now. You know, and especially all of our, you know, my generation, you know, and honestly, I think globally this is the case. People are just tired of it. People are tired of the foreign wars. And, you know, in the short term, war brings prosperity to, you know, the countries that are proxy winning the wars.
The war, yeah.
I don't know how else to say that, but basically proxy winning wars, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, look at the prosperity that World War II brought to the United States, and you know, so war is a way to, you know, bring in wealth. The problem is then that long term you have what you have right now. So right now the United States is still paying off the Afghanistan or the war on terror. And the war on terror, the United States will continue to pay off for a very, very long time because it was financed using debt. Right now, we're in a similar position where to finance just about anything, I mean, we're looking at upping the debt ceiling yet again, and it's happening over and over and over again. So we're looking at financing with debt. The problem is debt is already 120, I think it's over 120% of GDP at this point, which a lot of the big voices have been saying people no longer want to buy our securities. And when that happens, you can't then get debt. Like you can't then get the money to then fund whatever it is you're looking to fund. So I also wonder, I have an economic question about this. I wonder if somebody is telling Trump, hey, this is a way out of our economic problems. Even if it's short term, you know, I don't know that Donald Trump is looking at things long term. In the Big Beautiful Bill, one of the big criticisms of it was that it would create a lag for the next president coming in. So the next president coming in after Donald Trump would actually have a worse economic situation than we do right now. And so that's basically setting up the next guy or gal to fail. And so I do question, is there an economic incentive here? Did somebody tell Trump, hey, this will get everybody to stop looking at XYZ other problem, talk about something other than tariffs? So I wonder, you know, stuff, when you look at things in the media, nothing is ever as simple as, oh, well, this is what's happening and this is all that's happening. There's always something covering something else. So I'm also curious, you know, and only time will be able to tell that for us. Is this covering something else also? So you know, it's interesting because I think, let me see if I can find this Truth Social post from Donald Trump. But basically, when I posted this live stream, he had posted a Truth Social post that he was going to negotiate a beyond truce. Like a beyond peace, I think is what he said. And it went from beyond peace to absolute chaos really fast. And so, you know, it's also hard, you know, to trust what he's saying, because earlier this morning, he was like, well, I'm going to negotiate beyond peace. And it's going to be a big win, and the United States is going to broker peace immediately. And then now we have this
Yeah, that means someone got to him and told him to toe the lines. That's
Mhm.
what it means. Of course, again, I have nothing against Mr. Trump, but will I take him for what he says? No, I won't. He's a showman. He does not have a grasp of the complexity of this kind of issues, and to him, he's going to be doing what he will be ordered to do by certain entities. That's usually how it works in Washington. As one who spent time in DC, I was right there in the middle of it, so you kind of see how things work. But this one is on a much bigger aspects here. You
Yeah.
go, I'll take you guys back to Somalia when we were over there, and you just noticed how gradual we moved from one country to the next. We moved into Iraq, we moved into Libya, we moved into Syria, Afghanistan, and now you have Iran. And what's come after Iran? It was Ukraine before that, then Iran. But each one of them has its own dynamics per se. But as you mentioned earlier about this president is going to leave a mess for the next one, economically speaking, I will go even further and say that this is also a reflection of the failure of the system. That's, to me personally, we are on our last leg of the global hegemony. That's where we are. And I think when you start to see in these erratic policies, because there is no strategy in place, there is no vision, there is no debate. Tell me if it was any debate regarding this conflict with Iran. None. Let alone who decides on war is Congress, not the president. So it's going to become one of those. And again, the case of Iran is very different. There is some who argue that maybe Iran made a mistake. And the mistake is, or was, it didn't went ahead with developing the bomb. Because if they did, we won't be having this conversation today. I guarantee you that. And I always give the example of North Korea. Tell me, when was the last time we issued a threat against North Korea?
I can't remember
when.
when.
That's my point. Yeah. That's my point. So there are those who are saying maybe Iran made the mistake. Others saying no, whatever the case might be. There are those also saying, well, because they want to have a different system in Iran. Because as you know, guys, I don't know if you are familiar with an organization by the name of Mujahideen-e-Khalaq. To those who know a little bit of history of Iran, you know what I'm talking about. Funny enough, and I'm going to share this with you because it's nothing. I ran to someone yesterday in France from that organization. It was one of those coincidences. I was like, I never met anybody from. He was very eye-opening. We had a conversation, and it was like, wow. So to me, it becomes the idea of understanding. Because remember, guys, even inside Iran, there are those elements who are against the current government inside Iran. In other words, they are the one who wants to see the removal of that regime. They are those who wants to see the attacks from Israel on Iran, the attacks from the US on Iran. It's like every other government that has the pros and cons.
Yeah.
So don't dismiss this. When you see this kind of sort of a conflict, politically speaking, domestically inside Iran, because there are voices inside that they are against what the current government is doing or planning on doing and so forth. And that's why I'm saying I am reflecting the ideas of those who said back then that maybe Iran made the mistake by not developing the bomb. Because if they would have, we would be having a different conversation.
Well, it's very interesting, and I'm very curious to see over the next couple of days, David. I know we're coming up on time, and you are very tired.
I am indeed.
Thank you for getting on anyway.
Of course. Well, for the community, we'll do whatever needs to be done. I saw somebody here with the Army with Harmony.
Hey.
Oh, he's saying, let me share it with you. Hello, Elizabeth. Hello, Dr. O. Good to see you. Thank you very much, Army with Harmony. Good to see you. And good to see the community. Very excited to be back home. I will do even more on this, guys, on Friday, probably. it gives me a few more days to read up more, and I'll share a much bigger aspects on all this one. So, but for now, we just wanted to do this, and thank you for your support, guys. I want you to know we truly appreciate you. I know sometimes we do those scripted for sponsors and so forth. We want to thank you also for your kind support for this. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We'll be addressing another topic. We'll decide on it. Elizabeth and I will be talking about it later on.
It depends, I think, what happens overnight, like whether we're going to continue talking about this, because there is something I really want to talk about, and that is that China is building their first giant supercomputer network in space. I brought it up in the last show, but I'm really curious about it.
Let's do that. What do you guys think? Would you like to hear about this? Let me see your answer quickly in the chat box. Would you like to hear about this topic? Yes or no? I greatly appreciate you answering this, because it helps us to know exactly the kind of topics you would like us to address, and this is one of them that I am interested in it. But
yes, okay, we got a couple.
YT, you say yes. Manfi, you say yes. Truth Seeker, you say yes. Sanctan, you say yes. Army with Harmony, you say yes. Rampel so on, you say yes. Okay, done deal. That's it. So I'm gonna do some reading on it to update my, because I have to read up on it. You know already about it, Elizabeth, because you read some stuff on it. So
I've been following this AI trend for a while. So I may share this personal story tomorrow when we go through it. But I'm very, very interested in AI. I'm very interested in it because it is the next, like I'd call it the next space race, but it's the next economic race, more or less. And whoever wins the AI race wins basically global trade. And so I'm very interested in it. So this was a particularly interesting topic because, you know, you think of space and you think, oh no, that's sci-fi, that's not real, but it is absolutely real, and it has to be talked about because it's happening. And so, you know, China's not the only one that's building a supercomputer networks in space. And so, but anyway, I really want to talk
we'll
about
do
it.
it tomorrow. We look forward to that. I look forward to that conversation. So once again, guys, thank you so much for your kind support, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. See you guys.